numbered on there, so it'll make it real easy to go through. I'll reference a page so you can sort of understand.
Kevin,
follow
do
through.
You have one more?
What's that?
Do you have one more, or is that all you have?
I do.
I just want our county attorney to follow along, if that's possible. If not, I'll give him mine.
Yeah,
I'll share.
Yeah, and then I also have this in electronic format. I can email you guys later to reference it. And if the media needs it, although I did send out a press release on that.
Thank you.
So, thanks for having me. I'm a 17-year resident in Mesa County, still raising 3 kids. 2 are in college and 1 is in high school here in the Valley. I've been following politics for about 7 years, and specifically following the money trail. So I've got a website called Bet2Gov that a lot of people know about, and I've discussed it here in the past. So I usually publish the documentation that I find via court request. And so I just want you to understand the trail of this. It's everything sourced on here or is directly from a core request or from somebody that's provided the information locally to me through making contact with me through my website. The trail started with this, obviously, the last time this was presented, and it led me on a trail to start making some phone calls. Okay, what's this AFFH all about? What is it really about? And so I started with the federal government. In the grant applications and the contracts, there's actually federal numbers and contact people on there that are mentioned, as well as state individuals. So I call them, and the conversation sort of goes like this. Hey, I'm Kevin King from Mesa County. And so the conversation starts out kind of nice, that they kind of think I'm a county employee. And then suddenly I say, no, you don't understand. I'm not asking for privileged information here. I need to let you know I'm a private citizen. And as soon as I say that word, private citizen, the conversation immediately changes. I can't disclose that any longer. So carry on I do. I contact the state DOLA office. I believe his name's on the Bob Todd. It's on Scott's memo. I call him as a private citizen. Email him. Never responded. Until he says, you need to go to our public relations officer. Denise Steptoe, I think is her name. And it's included in this package as well, that email, that communication that I've had. And the only really big question I had was, there was a core request, and I've included all that detail in there. And what I didn't get to begin with when the county provided me with the contract, was there was actually an application prior to that's even more disturbing than the contract itself, with all the 50 federal grants. And I'll just emphasize those very briefly on here so I don't spend a whole lot of time on it. But at the end of the day, never spoke to Bob. I got a quick email, you need to go to this person. So then I called locally. They have a regional office here. DOLA does. So I called the local DOLA office. And the conversations are always interesting, because as soon as I tell them I'm a private citizen, I don't have an answer for you. These are people supposed to have answers, but I can't get it. So anyway, down the core request I go. The very first thing, and I think Scott mentioned it, is the county does, just backing up, I just want to briefly mention the entitlement thing. Entitlement, non-entitlement is just about a demographic, a population size of a county or a city, that they can directly access these HUD funds without having to put the counties, without having to go through the State Department. All that is a State Department. And to the point of, are there requirements to report? Mesa County still has requirements. And in the email, I've copied the response, but item number 1 on page 1 at the very top, this was Denise's response regarding not only what you guys are required to report, but it says right there in the first paragraph, Please see CDBG Guidebook on DOLA's website, Section 5, pages 4 and 5, for suggested actions that the county may consider to assure compliance. Answers my question on the AFFH. Does it apply? Absolutely applies to Mesa County if you accept this grant money. That whole string of core requests, one of the things I asked for were invoices from Mesa County to DOLA, an audit. I've asked for the letters that John Marichon just spoke of asking for how, if they can spend this money a certain way. Nothing was given. I didn't receive any. I did receive invoices from Mesa County to DOLA, but there is nothing as required per Section 5, pages 4 and 5, and those are just a couple of them. Nothing has been filled out, and one of the things I was looking for was actually these letters. Hey, we're going to use this money a different way, because in my core request I got the expenditure report from Mesa County. And when you follow that trail a little bit, and I'll get to that shortly, I'm just trying to give a quick overview. Other channels, these monies are being funneled to other entities in this valley as well, not just strictly for the revolving loan fund. And I think if you go to the application that you guys signed in 2014, it's very specific in that where these funds are to be used, and if they're not used that way, you do have to send a letter to DOLA, and DOLA has to give the permission. You can't make that decision here, and they can't make that decision. Only the state can make that decision to allow those monies to be used elsewhere. So following the money trail, you'll see that. But some of the things, so the entitlement issue is, as Mr. Coleman said, was 50,000 population for a city, they can go direct to HUD. 200,000 population in a county, they can go direct to HUD. So there are some reporting requirements, as I mentioned. So in the original grant application, and that I'll tell you that starts on page number 12 and carries on, and I'm going to briefly point to this because maybe we may need a ruling right away on this one. The agenda was published, the Mesa County meeting agenda was published 10/28/2016. The application to DOLA on pages 24, and this is at the bottom, not on the actual application, page 24 and page 32, require a 5-day notice. I don't know that that meets the 5-day notice on the 28th, so maybe we may have to come back another day, but I'll let you guys decide on that one. Carrying on, one of the things in the grant application was a citizen participation plan on the page 11 of that application. Numbers B1 through 6 specifically states in number 2 that reasonably and timely access to local meetings, informations, and records relating to its proposed and actual use of CDBG funds. In the last meeting on September 12, 2016, John Marichon admitted the RLF meetings are in fact private, and not even the commissioners can attend these meetings unless granted permission. There are no details of public meetings listed on the incubator website calendar, nor the revolving loan fund tab on the incubator website, per required in the initial application that was signed by Commissioner Justman. Page 6 of the initial grant application, Mesa County agreed to every $20,000 of provided federal funds would require only one job to be created or retained. Pretty slippery slope there of retain. You know, that's what we were all fed that when the TARP funds were all presented. All it was, it came out to this shovel-ready projects, and we just got to retain. It went from we're going to create jobs to we're just going to retain them now because it's not working. So same thing mentioned in here. So, and 51% of these created and retained jobs have to go to low and moderate income individuals, either directly or indirectly via an employer. There's nothing I can find in my core request that has been presented to date that has been presented to DOLA that requirement is being met based on the original application. So DOLA via core request provided zero details on how many jobs. We don't even know how many jobs were created or provided or retained, for that matter, to DOLA. There's no report out there, or I would have gotten it. I specifically requested every single ounce of documentation. Those were not provided, so I just have to assume they're not out there. Page 13 on the initial grant application, number 2, allows the HUD secretary to make final and non-reviewable determinations regarding displacement. So there's a displacement part on there that you're required. But what's interesting about that is the HUD secretary can overrule. It says right on there, sections this doesn't apply, section this doesn't apply. They make their determination, and that's it. It's final. So something to kind of look a little bit more into on a legal standpoint there. That one really kind of stood out to me a little bit. Page 13 and 14 of the initial grant application, number 2 specifically stated Mesa County will. I mean, these are assurances that Mesa County will do this. Affirmatively further fair housing. You'll see that highlighted on there. Page 14 of the initial grant, and this one, since we're talking about BLM stuff here in a little bit, and the NEPA Act and the grant TASER grant application that we spoke about. Section F, page 14 of the application. I'll give you the actual page here. This one's really disturbing to me. So page 26 on the document I handed you. So it says that Mesa County will assume its chief executive officer, which is Commissioner Puglisi as the board director. Currently, you will retain the status of responsible federal official under NEPA Act of 1969 and other federal programs. It doesn't say what those are. It just says other federal programs. So the language there is really scary. All along I've been wondering if we might as well not have a local elected, because Washington, D.C. is telling us what we can and can't do. Well, lo and behold, it looks like we have a federal official right here based on this application. And I didn't know if you knew that or not, but...
I did not.
Okay.
Kevin, we're going to need to wrap up because there's a lot of people who want to testify.
Okay.
Kara, if I could, I'd like to comment on that specifically.
Sure. I'd love to hear your comment on that specifically.
I mean, the language specifically says, insofar as provisions of such federal law apply to the Colorado Community Development Block Grant. So I guess, Kevin, unless you can show a specific provision of NEPA that applies to CDBG, this is a red herring. I mean, there's no issue. NEPA applies if it applies. If it doesn't apply, there's nothing in here that would warrant concern. And the fact that, you know, we're saying we accept jurisdiction of the federal court, well, the federal court is the only court that, if they were going to sue us for failing to comply with NEPA, that's where they would go, and we wouldn't have a choice of not accepting jurisdiction. So I'm not sure what the concern is there. If you understand how federal court jurisdiction works, we're already subject to federal court jurisdiction in terms of NEPA compliance, because the federal court is where provisions of NEPA are litigated. So I mean, do you have a specific provision of NEPA that applies to the CDBG grant funding?
But if you go back to the requirement of the sections in the guidebook that you are required to present to DOLA on an annual basis, the jobs is one of them, the AFFH is another one of them,
and none of that applies to NEPA.
So there's an environmental
NEPA
review.
Doesn't apply to jobs. It doesn't apply to
okay. Fair enough.
Fair housing. I mean,
Fair enough. I'll
this
move
is all
on.
boilerplate that is in every federal contract. it looks scary until you actually understand what it says, and what it says is, insofar as federal law applies to these acts, and if it applies, it applies. We can't, by not accepting money or accepting money, we can't avoid the application of federal law. So I guess, you know, the fact that we're signing something that says we agree federal law applies to us, I don't believe we're assuming additional responsibilities or obligations simply by agreeing that federal law applies to us. It's not specific to CDGB funding.
I just got about 3 or 4 more things to point out since I'm getting short on time here. In the other grant that's by the community housing, there's an attachment G on the immigration policy in that application, and that, I believe, is on...
Wait, so Kevin, I just want to make sure that we're not mixing. So is that related to?
It's related because it's a CDBG grant, so...
Okay, so...
Yeah, it's all incorporated,
Okay.
but I wanted to point out the fact that in that one, it's a nonprofit entity, it's a pass-through, and all I would ask is that the nonprofits just go direct to HUD and discount us being in the middle of this. Obviously very difficult to read language. So in this one, the one that's disturbing here, and this is on page 2 at the bottom, the page 18 attachment G of that CDBG application for housing resources of Western Colorado.
So Kevin, I'm sorry, can you, because you'll have an additional 10 minutes to talk about that specific application.
Okay, so I didn't know, because I heard he said there was 2 of them they were trying to approve.
I think he
so.
was kind of doing it broad. I want to
Okay.
keep us all in line,
All right.
and that'll give you more
So
time to talk about.
I'll get back and then I'll speak
Okay.
on that other 10
Okay.
minutes on that. So the point here ultimately is, what is AFFH going to do for us? And I think if you look at what Douglas County, which he spoke about, but he didn't speak about the town of Castle Rock, one of the things that they specifically stated in their letter to their community citizens was, as a town council, we will resist all federal attempt to destroy our local sovereignty. That's where that NEPA is connection there for you, Mr. Coleman. It gets a little cloudy for me. Be it from HUD, the EPA, or any other government agency, Council will always defend our residents' right to make their own local decisions without federal interference. That's what I'm asking Mesa County to do. While I appreciate the many good works that are represented by your programs, accepting onerous federal grant requirements which harm our community cannot be the price to pay for federal monies. I'm going to give a brief comment here because I know you guys are going to press me for time. There's an enforcement arm called PEI, Private Enforcement Initiative. So here's another federal grant that comes behind this one that says, oh, by the way, we're going to create these testers, and these testers are going to come to Mesa County, okay, and determine if you're compliant with AFFH. So I've included in this package, and I challenge you to read it because I believe these testers have been here in Mesa County. I've given you all their documentation, how they document, and they're so sensitive to every conversation, they can deem it racist. So read it. I don't know if it's gotten settled. Maybe the incubator folks here can let us know on that one. But there is federal funds not only saying, hey, you got to apply AFFH, but here comes the enforcement arm, the scarier part, called PEI, and they're called testers. And one of the things that I read under a GAO report, protected classes, protected people. Now, they keep saying those regulations are, they don't apply, they don't apply. That keeps growing, and Commissioner McGinnis, you agree, that it was gone from 18 pages already up to like 25 pages, this broadening scope of what AFFH is becoming and turning into. And I'm just saying, the scary part for me, and you guys are going to, and we've talked about this, but you can't discriminate against a Muslim that practices Sharia law. You won't be able to discriminate against that in this county based on this rule. Is it happening? Hey, Google's out there. It's fantastic stuff when you search and put in the right terms. Sure enough, we have Sharia-compliant loans in Mesa County offered right now on the website. They've applied in all 50 states, and they can give a non-bearing, no-interest loan to buy a house or to start a business or whatever that may be. There's insurance companies that are Sharia-compliant now. You think small-town America, this is not going to happen, right? Lewiston, Maine, of all places, has right in there, and I've put the comment in there, or the actual place. They've written it right in there. We're not Sharia compliant in our town. We need to be for AFFH. So here it is. It's on our doorstep. But the other one is the $62 million lawsuit when we're talking about enforcement. That Westchester County, you guys got to read that. I put the lawsuit in there, the actual lawsuits in the attachments, so you can read that. The decree settlement is the one that gets really outlandish, and I've pasted all the pertinent stuff in there. They do come in and tell you, you're going to have this percent of Latinos, this percent of black people, probably this percent of gender identity people, and this percentage of Muslims. It's all in here. It's happened already. And interesting enough, that's Hillary Clinton's hometown. Go figure. And they are, right now, saying no more. So, in my documentation for the media, I did follow the money trail. I was able to get access to an audit from the incubator. I also, through the information that I've all attached it in there, followed the money to local businesses, KT Development, 5-Star CDL Academy, Vintage Overland, Happy Trails, and Colorado Clean. $160,000 to Colorado Clean. The thing is, you guys write Western Colorado Business Development a check for $160,000, and then we don't know if that $160,000 goes all the way to Colorado Clean or any of these other individuals. And I put on there some question marks of some individuals involved in there. Have been involved in fraud in the past. I've highlighted all that for you to look over. So all I'm saying is I've done my homework on this. This is a dangerous path. If you lead us down this direction, again, I'm urging a huge no. This is something so dangerous we just can't touch it. And then on top of that is if these businesses are so good and so successful that $160,000 would go. And it doesn't even say revolving loan fund, so it just says business assistance. So we don't even know if that's going to come back or not. But ironically, with Western Colorado Business Development, they need $350,000. Well, that's what they're short in their financials right now. So it's funny how that lined up. And then to finalize it all, for me, is if that business is good enough to make it, there is private investment dollars, I can guarantee you, that will fund $160,000 for a business opportunity, if it's that good. We don't need government's hands in the middle of that's creating all these other tentacles that probably got us here in the first place, why we don't have any more money. But we got to stop this 1-800 call federal grants to bail us out. I don't want to be here 30 years from now and see my kids having to deal with this stuff that you allowed to happen today. I don't.